Welcome to Thank You for Your Service from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. My name is Tom Heiser, and I will be your host today. In 2015, women veterans represented more than 10% of the total U.S. veteran population. According to VA statistics, there are over 33,000 female heroes in Wisconsin alone. Today we will be interviewing two such heroes, Ramona Witte and Kathi Havitz, who both served in the U.S. Marine Corps. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, starting out, why did you choose the Marine Corps?
That's a long story. I was graduating with my bachelor's degree and was footloose and fancy-free, and I love to travel, meet new people, go new places. And I thought, why not do that and let Uncle Sam pay for my travels? So I went down to the recruiters, and the day I went down, my first choice was Air Force, but they were only at that time recruiting officers that had an engineer's degree, and I had a library science degree. So the Navy recruiter was not in his office at the moment, and I couldn't go Army because my dad went Army, so I didn't want it in any way for this to look like I was following in his footsteps. So the Marine Corps recruiter was there and more than happy to talk to me, and I went ahead and signed up.
Okay. Kathi, why the Marines?
Well, I was going to go on to college after high school, but couldn't afford to. So my brother came home on leave. He was a Marine also, and said, you should go in the Marine Corps. And I said, okay, let's do it. And I took off the next week and enlisted. I was still in high school at the time, but it was clear where my future was leading me, and I figured if I was going to do a service, I was going to do the best I could and go for the strongest that I could.
So what motivated you to go in?
Well, at the time, there was the Iranian crisis going on. Kevin Hermaning was a prisoner of war, a hostage from Wisconsin, and of course that was in the news at that time, and so it was constantly in our face. Obviously, we were very offended by it, and felt like if I had a direction to go, I wanted to do something where I could make a difference and make a difference in the world. So,
Ramona, same question. What motivated you to enlist?
Well, I was graduating with my bachelor's degree in library science, and there isn't anything you can do with a bachelor's in library science except at that time be a school librarian, and you also have to have a teaching degree to be a school librarian. So after 6 years of college to try and get double degree, I ran out of time, ran out of money, got tired of school, so I graduated with my library science degree and decided I'd just go off and see the world.
Okay, perfect. You said you were in high school at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go in during summer break, or did you
no, I went in a delayed entry program. I enlisted in the beginning of my senior year and delayed almost a year past that. So,
Ramona, roughly about how old were you at that time without getting real definitive?
Well, I was 6 years out of high school.
Okay.
That I'd already put 6 years into college, struggling to get a double degree.
Where were you living at the time when you entered?
I was living in Denton, Texas, graduating from Texas Women's University, and I was a transplant to Texas and didn't like Texas, so I knew I wasn't going to stay there. That was a given. So I was really ready to go out and see the world.
Kathi, where were you living at the time when you went into service?
I was living at home
Were you
in Wisconsin Rapids.
Okay. So you came out of Rapids and joined the
Yep,
Marine
I
Corps.
graduated from Lincoln High School, and I've lived here most of my life except when I was gone with the Marine Corps and then pursuing a career after the Marine Corps. Moved back about 18 years ago.
Okay. So where did you have to go to join? Did you have
Down to Milwaukee.
to Milwaukee?
Yeah. I tested here and then went down to, after I passed the test here, because you have to be a woman Marine, you have to score a higher score than any of the other services. And so once I got through that, then I went down to Milwaukee to the AFI station for physical and to enlist.
So being in Texas, where did you have to go to enlist?
Well, the recruiter that signed me up was right there in Denton, but then the AFI station was in Dallas. So they were transporting me down to Dallas to do all the examinations and testing.
What did you envision military life to be like, Ramona?
Well, I envisioned it to be hard. I like hard, though. I like challenges. I like to be busy. I can't stand to be bored. I like to be absolutely busy. I have a very high level of energy that I like to be expending, and I like to just go, and just really work hard and make a difference. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be a patriot. Actually, it runs in my blood to be a patriot, that I can tie my family back to patriots that fought in the Revolutionary War. I am a member of DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution, and so it's in my blood to be a patriot and do things for my country, that our country gives so much to us. I wanted to spend some time when I was single, footloose, fancy-free, and give to my country. So I did, that's what I did, and so it was a giving. I wanted to be able to give back, and that's what it was. And in the process, then I was able to travel the world and see a lot of different places, meet a lot of new people.
Okay. Kathi, what did you think the military was going to be like after you joined?
I guess I had a pretty good idea of what it was like because my brother was in it, and I would listen to him when he would come home on leave. And obviously, I didn't know the exact experience that women were going to have, but I can't say I was surprised by anything. I knew that it would be difficult physically and tasking academically. So.
Okay. What do you remember about your first days in the military, Kathi?
You mean going to boot camp?
Yes.
Well, I guess you get there in the middle of the night and you get to be introduced to 128 other women who are trying to do the same thing that you're doing. You're living in squad bays, and you have 2 DIs per platoon. There's 2 platoons, and you just begin to learn about the Marine Corps and its not only its traditions but what their aspirations are, and then of course there's physical training and learning how to march, learning how everything operates. So it's kind of a whirlwind in the first couple weeks, but then after that you get settled in and things become more of a routine, and you're not surprised by so many things. So
Nervous? Scared?
I was never scared. And I think the good part is I haven't been scared since either. So, it teaches you to stand up for yourself. So.
Okay, Ramona, your first days in the military.
Well, I arrived at Quantico, where the officer boot camp is. It's called officer training. And you get on a bus at the airport, they pick you up, you take you over to the area in Quantico where you're going to be living for 6 weeks. And you get off the bus and you do more paperwork, and then it's line up and go here and do this, and every second of every day is they have you busy and occupied as a group, that the men and the women in officer training do everything right alongside each other, absolutely everything, including crawling through the mud pit with your rifle strapped to your back, which was called the Quigley. We all crawled through the Quigley on a cold fall day. We did everything the men did, and so it was, you're right, you set the regiment. The regimentation was the hardest part to get used to. It wasn't hard, I wasn't scared. Physically demanding, yes, but they wake you up at the crack of dawn by beating on the metal trash can, and from then on it's just go, 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 and you're at their women fancy what you're doing next.
Very similar?
Similar, yes. I went to Paris Island because I was an enlisted person, and Ramona obviously went to Quantico because of being an officer, so a little bit different. We didn't train with the men. during my boot camp, which was unusual or different from any of the other boot camps around us also, was that they were doing a recruiting film on us because we were the first women to qualify on the rifle range as going through boot camp, the enlisted women, and the first women to be individually combat trained and go to bivouac, which was different than any of the platoons of women Marines before us. So we had a few cameras in our faces when we were rappelling and learning to shoot on the range, and because they were doing a recruiting film, I gave you a clip of a picture of my mom and my sister in the stands of our graduation, and my graduation clip also, which is kind of cool. I was a physical fitness award winner, meaning I was the strongest one there of the 2 platoons. And academically, I think I scored 20th, which, at 94% I was still pretty proud of. But, there's a lot of really intelligent, tough-minded women there. So it's, it's a different camp to go through than most.
So Ramona trained with men, you trained basically with women.
I trained with all women, yes.
DIs were women also?
The DIs are women also, yes.
Pretty tough ladies?
Very tough ladies. Very tough ladies. If they were angry with you, they would bounce when they talked. It was, they were that tough. So.
And they got into
They got into your face, yes, they certainly did.
So many of the movies that we see that deal with the basic training with the Marines is
with their campaign hat on, beating down on you. Yeah, that happens with the
absolutely.
women also.
Absolutely.
I worked very hard to make sure that it happened as little as possible. So.
understandable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ramona, basic for you with the men, male DIs, female DIs, or combination?
The women had their women platoon, and then the men had their men platoons. So we didn't sleep in the same barracks. And the women platoon did have a woman DI and a woman lieutenant as our commander for the platoon. But once we were out of that barracks, you couldn't tell the women from the men, all dressed in our camouflage uniforms and doing the exact same thing.
Interesting. Advanced training. What advanced training did you have after basic, Ramona?
After 6 weeks of basic training at Quantico, then the officers go over to what's called okay, brain freeze. TBS. Okay, so after basic training of 6 weeks, we go across the base at Quantico, we're still at Quantico, and we do 3 months of training over at the basic school, which the Marines call TBS for short, the basic school, where the officers are all trained to be a company commander in combat, including the women. So over there, we were in the same barracks, although these barracks had separate rooms down the hallway. So the women were put in rooms with women, and the men had their own rooms with the men, of course. But we were in the same barracks at that time, just separate bedrooms on a hallway. And we just absolutely did everything the men did as well through our whole training there, where every single one of us went to classes, went out in the field, had field training. We went out at the end and did a 3-day war out in the field, out in the winter, in the snow. The women were just right alongside the men. Your pup tents were right next to theirs, and you couldn't tell the women from the men again. We were just doing the absolute same things, doing point guards, attacking a pretend city, attacking across streams where the enemies, which there's a Marine company that plays the enemies against us. They're out there shooting CS gas at us and firing at us the whole 9 yards. That we're out there in a real situation war, just shooting blank bullets is all we're doing. And machine guns, the whole 9 yards, setting up encampments, the women all right along with the men, learning how to be a company commander in combat.
Advanced training for you, Kathi. Did you go, after basic, did you go to another school?
I went to administrative training, and I also did a bulk fuel training after a couple years in the Marine Corps. So, and then of course there's other small classes of security and then of course requalifying on the rifle range and qualifying for pistols and And because Korea, we needed to be armed and to guard, we qualified with shotguns.
So your basic training was infantry related, is what?
It was geared towards being individual combat trained, yes.
Okay. So now you're done with basic, you're done with your next training. Where's your first duty station after that, Kathy?
They shipped me right off to Okinawa. Yeah, I went to Okinawa, and I worked for the G1 office there, and I did orders for a while, and then after a couple months, an opportunity came up for me to join a combat service support group, and I got attached to them and shipped off to Korea.
Okay. Fly over, or did you have to take a ship over to Okinawa?
I had to fly over at that time, and I don't even know if that's changed now. I'd expect it's changed, that women and women were not allowed on ships at all in the Marine Corps. So
Okay.
the bad part about that is it put me on the advanced party, so I flew over in a very large plane with my feet up on a tank, and then had to set up all the tents and get everything ready once we got there. And it was in the middle of winter in Korea, and it was not very pleasant weather, so.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, you're done with your officer school. What's the first duty station that you had, Ramona?
Well, they ship us off to more training, that then we become an officer in a particular MOS. So even the combat officers that stayed infantry go off to an advanced infantry training school. I myself was sent off to a supply officer school to become a supply officer in MOS 3001. That's the supply officer. So that school was at brain freeze. Okay, so supply officer school was at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. So we were there then for a couple of months, going through supply officer training. This was men and women together, and this is when the education part of it really becomes tough, where everybody's trying to graduate #1 in your class. There were only about 30 or so students there from my TBS class, and the person that graduates top of their class gets to pick the station that they are sent to next. You get to pick that. I wasn't fighting to be #1 because I already knew and I'd already requested and received my #1 choice, which was to stay right there at Camp Lejeune and be a supply officer there. But it's very competitive. It's supply officer school. So it's very, very hard, stressful, competitive to be the #1 in the class. After that, then I was already living on base quarters to go to supply officer school, so I was able to stay right in those same quarters and then just start going to my job there on the same base, just on the opposite side of the base. So I was appointed as a supply officer for the headquarters company of Headquarters Battalion of 1st Marine Division. So I'm in 1st Marine Division, an extremely large, one of the largest combat units in the Marine Corps. And as the supply officer of Headquarters Battalion, that was, at the time, that was the largest supply account in the whole Marine Corps. So I had warehouses upon warehouses and parking lots upon parking lots of military vehicles full of gear and full of vehicles. And my budget was more than $1 million a year at that time. So it kept me quite busy.
I would say it did. I would say so. Okay, you're in Okinawa.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different than Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. How did you find that to be interesting? Totally new experience in life?
Well, it was definitely interesting. It was often we were not able to go off base, so we only got to spend time with each other. But when we did get to go out into the downtown Japan area, it was certainly interesting, and you got to learn about other cultures. Again, I'll bring my brother into this because he deserves it. He was stationed on the north end of the island at that time, and I was on the south end. And he was in a motor transport unit. And once in a while, he'd have to bring the general down in a Jeep, and he'd show up at my headquarters battalion with his officer and drop him off, and then him and I would get to go have lunch. And a couple times, he showed up in front of the headquarters office with a semi, and I jumped in and we went for a ride. So yeah.
So you got to see your brother while you were...
Yeah, he was there the first couple months that I was there, and then he left about the time I went to Korea. So.
Okay, so different culture that you ran into in
Absolutely.
life.
And funny thing is, there was a number of young men from Rapids there also. Once in a while, I'll tell you another little funny ditty about the guys from Rapids. They wouldn't write home, and so I'd write a postcard for them and make them sign it and send it to their moms so that they knew that they were okay, because I grew up with these guys and knew their parents, and so I'd make them communicate with their mom, even though they weren't so apt to do so otherwise. So.
Exactly. So when you're in Okinawa, you're still with an all-female?
No.
You now...
No. Once you get out of basic training, it all becomes mixed.
Okay.
So.
When you first arrived at your first overseas duty station, what was it like for you? And what station was it?
It was Okinawa. I was from Camp Lejeune. They sent me out to be the supply officer at 3rd Marine Division, 3rd FSSG on Okinawa. And I was in the medical battalion, the 1st Medical Battalion of 3rd FSG. And we were stationed up at Camp Hansen, which is up on the north end of the island,
Yep.
not far from where your brother was.
Yep.
So it was really exciting. I requested to be shipped out there. I could have stayed at Camp Lejeune my whole time. I wanted to see the world. So I requested to go, and they approved it. I was so thrilled. They approved it. I got out there, and I was really excited because I wanted to be there. But it's very different as an officer. We had free reign. We got to come and go off base as often as we wanted. Being up at Camp Hansen, and the largest Marine bases, and the big air base are all down the south end, which is where all the activity is. All my officer friends of the same rank that I hung out with at Camp Lejeune, they were all down the south. So I bought me a little Toyota car, stick shift. The first time in my life I had to do a stick shift. But I would get on the weekends, I would get in my little car and I would just go and see the whole island and visit friends, and a lot of shopping and a lot of tourist type things. It was great.
What job or assignments did you have, Kathy, when you were in Okinawa? And then we'll work our way to Korea.
In Okinawa, I had just one job to do, and that was to figure out orders for everyone being deployed off from Okinawa to other countries, and then I would create their orders. That was solely what my office did, and we did it by the hundreds. So every day it was, hundreds of folders going through, assigning people to other bases to deploy them. So.
Computer or electric typewriter?
Electric typewriter, and by the time I got to Korea, because we had no electricity that could be relied on, it was back to the manual typewriter. You had to press really hard.
Yes.
So there was like 10 copies.
Yeah, kerchunk.
And no spell checker.
No.
Absolutely not. No.
And your primary assignment when you were in Okinawa?
I was supply officer at the medical battalion. So supply in general, they joke that we're in charge of the beans, Band-Aids, bullets, and vehicles, of course, as well. But then at 3rd Medical Battalion, I was also in charge of everything they needed medical-wise, everything, including the drugs. And so I had a locked case in my warehouse that only one of my enlisted troops had access to. And we had to sign those items in and out and keep a tight inventory on them. And this was all before computers too. So it was all paper files of how many Band-Aids do you have and so on.
You remember any of the other people that were in your unit when you were in Okinawa?
Oh, yes, yes. It was interesting that being a medical battalion, I had Navy officers in charge of me. And that was really different because they're way more laid back, way more easy to get along with, way less regimented than the Marine officers. So it was very different, very different.
Kathy, remember any people from your unit in Okinawa?
Yes, as I sure do, and as a matter of fact, I still keep up with the ladies that I was stationed with there. There's about 5 of us that still correspond back and forth. Thank you for Facebook. We got to catch up with each other again. A lot of us had lost touch and didn't know where we were, where each other were. As a matter of fact, one of my friends from Okinawa, I saw her for the first time in 35 years a couple months ago. She stopped in Rapids on her way to California.
Wow.
And ate at the restaurant and visited for a day. And, we caught up like no time had gone by at all. It was, incredibly fun to just continue our friendship. So
35-year breath.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Nice.
Keep in touch with anybody at all, Ramona?
No, I was not able to. The officers, once you leave your training and your MOS school, you're sent off to all different corners of the world to be in charge of a company over here, a company over there. So we're all split up big time. And for a while I was able to keep in touch with a number of the female officers I went through OCS and TBS with. But after so many transfers, you just lose touch. You just do. Even as hard as we tried to stay in touch, you just lose touch.
Any casualties in your unit at all?
No.
Kathy?
In Korea, we lost 13 people during our operation.
Okay.
Only one in my immediate unit.
Awarded any medals or citations?
I was awarded the Navy Achievement Medal for superior service. That was in Norfolk, Virginia. My job there was we were in a operational planning office, and I supported 20 officers there. And I would pretty much work 12 to 14, 16 hours days, doing their correspondence, proofreading what they were putting out. Their favorite thing to me was to say, Sergeant Havitz, keep me out of jail. So I would make sure that there was nothing conflicting in what they were putting out before I would manually type it and send it off. At that time, we were finally becoming electronic. So.
Awards or citations for you, Ramona?
Yes, sir. I was awarded 3 ribbons for superior performance and a Marine Corps Expeditionary medal. I do have 1 medal in addition to 3 ribbons. The medal was a unit award that was awarded to my unit in Okinawa for going to Korea, to the DMZ area up in Korea for training. And I begged and begged to go with them. I was in the Marine Corps to see the world, remember? And I really, really begged to go. And they made me stay back on Okinawa to hold down the fort on Okinawa. But I wanted to go so bad. I really wanted to go.
What was your highest rank, Ramona?
Major. I was promoted to major. It is my highest rank, yes.
In Okinawa, or?
That was later. After I did 5 years active duty, and then I did 5 years reserve duty. So I left active duty as a first lieutenant, and then during my duty in the reserves, I attained the rank of captain and then major.
Kathy, your highest rank?
Sergeant.
E5 rank? Or?
E5, yes.
Okay, I don't know if it's a gunnery sergeant or...
Nope, E5.
Okay.
I was in a total of 6 years.
6 years. Was that your initial enlistment was 6, or did you
My
extend?
initial enlistment was 3 years, and then as soon as I got done with the 3 years, I continued with my same unit in Norfolk in an active status for a couple years after that. But I never officially had to re-enlist for 3 years, but I was doing the same job as a reserve that I was doing as on active duty, and would go on and off active duty as as needed. So, and that was for a couple years in Norfolk.
Okay. What was everyday life like for you when you were in Okinawa and your unit is now in Korea? What was everyday life like?
Well, it was more difficult because to supply a unit that is across the ocean, it's of course a lot more challenging. So they would let me know what they needed and I would pack it all up and find a way to get it to them. But it was quiet. The barracks was empty. The commanding officers were gone. I was pretty much left in charge of who was left behind, which wasn't very many, but I had to step up then and take care of everyone that was left behind and keep them in line and keep the clinic running. At Camp Hansen, our company was responsible for running a medical clinic that was there on site, and of course the other marine companies that were there were still there, so the clinic was still running, and I had to keep that going and keep them in meds and Band-Aids, and so it was very busy, but also very quiet and lonely.
Okay, you're now in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
What was your everyday life there like? Because you said the electricity was touch and go at best, and
Touch and go at best. Because I had to go there on the advanced party, I was there almost 2 months before the operation ever started. We had to get the camp set up and get everything in place for the operation to actually begin. So at that time, I was the only woman Marine there. One of the pictures I have is and another funny story, I had them build me a head or a bathroom because I was the only woman there. And they labeled it WM, which stood for Woman Marine. And I said, you notice there's no S on the end because, it was me. And I was very grateful to have it, out in the field.
Yes.
But my job's out there, because we didn't have an actual operation starting right away, getting everything set up. I drove a bulk fuel truck around and filled up all of the tanks in each of the tents so that we would have heat at night, and got to know some of the South Korean people that were there, the military people, and their nickname for me was Havichan, which meant Little Havitz. And that and round eye, so got to know them, and it was the operation that I was on was a joint operation amongst all of the branches of service with South Korea, in anticipation of again having to engage North Korea, which fortunately we haven't had to since then, but again we every year in around April, May timeframe, you'll notice that North Korea gets very angry with us, and it's because that operation is still going on a yearly basis, and it's us practicing war against North Korea, and that angers them still to this day every year. So
you mentioned driving this fuel truck around
Mm-hmm.
and fueling the tanks in the tents.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys lived in tents.
We lived in tents, yes.
You didn't have metal Quonset huts or buildings?
No, we arrived on an open airfield and set up our tents there, and that each of them had an individual heater that we had. I used to build myself furniture, and so I have all the amenities of home, like I wanted, but build myself a coffee table out of a spool, and I put a bunch of C-ret boxes together for a dresser, and all that good stuff. So, but it was wet, dirty, and cold. So,
Not necessarily in that order.
not necessarily in that order, and at the same time somewhat dangerous because of the cold weather. That was how we lost the guy in my unit, was that he froze to death. So, and which was unfortunate. He was in the Army, and he didn't have a tight-knit group of military people around him, and we lost an eye on him, and he froze to death overnight.
So the weather in Korea is similar to Wisconsin weather?
It is, yeah. Yeah, almost on the same season.
Humidity in the summer and
Yep,
Cold in the winter.
yep.
Okinawa's weather, what was that like? Similar?
Okinawa is tropical weather. You have the wet season when the monsoons come through, and we had two come through. That's not fun. And then you have the dry season, but it's doesn't get really cold and but it gets very hot. Very hot. I took snorkeling and scuba diving lessons. There's a very nice, beautiful coral reef off of Okinawa in the China Bay. It's on the west side of Okinawa. So I would go snorkeling and scuba diving to cool off.
Pays to be an officer.
Very, very
Apparently.
tropical. Very, very tropical. Lots of rain.
Okay, while you were in service, homesick?
No, actually not. I grew up in campgrounds. My father was a school teacher that was off every summer, so I grew up in campgrounds. We had the first Winnebago, literally, that he bought an empty used bread truck and turned it into a camper. And we spent the summers on the road, and I've seen almost all of the United States. So just traveling like that, just getting out, just going. I wasn't homesick at all. Back then, it was before the internet, before cell phones, so all I could do was write home, and it took 2 weeks for them to get my letter, and it took 2 weeks for me to get their letter. But that's the way we communicated, was in writing with a 2-week gap. But I never got homesick.
Kathy?
I don't think I ever got homesick, but I do have to say one of the best parts about being in the military was when I got to come home every year. I normally would come home for a week, and homecomings were always one of the best. Get to see everyone again, and of course everyone has plans for you that you didn't really were hoping to do, but and pretty soon your week is up and you're gone. But it's always good to see someone, and of course see your family. So.
Okay, did you take any reminders of home with you over there? Pictures?
I had a couple of pictures, and my mother was always very good about writing to me. She, was always right on the spot, whether it would be a long letter or a short letter. She'd always make sure I had, a letter and mail call. So that was always nice. So, and I had a couple of good friends that would write me also. So, they kept me apprised of what was happening in Wisconsin. So.
Ramona, did you take any reminders of home with you when you were overseas?
Actually, no, I didn't. Just my favorite outfits to wear, which probably sounds silly, but that was it. Yeah, that connected me with home.
Care packages. Did you ever receive a care package from home?
Oh, yes. And the cookies was always the best part. Mom made great cookies. Yes, you looked forward to those.
Care packages. Did you receive any too, Kathy?
I don't recall getting any care packages from home, but lots of letters. That was what was most important to me, so make sure everyone was okay.
But she would have to send me lots of cookies, because when you go to company mail call, they're all standing out in like a parking lot thing in formation, and they called your name. You can go up and get your mail. So everyone knows you got cookies. So it had to be a lot of cookies. They expected you to share.
Oh, yeah. While you were in Korea, Kathy, Armed Forces Radio, any English-speaking radio you listened to, or English-speaking television channels over there?
No, like I said, we were out in the field. We didn't have access to any of that. Once a week we got to have a little bit of break and sit down, and we would get issued one beer and get to talk to each other, and call each other by our first names and relax a little bit, but that was about all that we had. Once in a while we would go out into town, and I do recall us taking a bus up to see a historic area in northern South Korea.
Okinawa, Armed Forces Radio, English-speaking TV at all?
Yes, there was a radio station that was on broadcasting out of one of the large bases on the south part of the island. So they'd play English music, give news from back home, and play the classic rock and roll that I loved at the time. And then there was one TV station that they also broadcast from the large base down south. one station. And I know this is going to sound really weird with all those mean, tough Marines, but those men would gather in the Commons area where the TV was during their lunch breaks to watch the soap operas. The
guys in my unit did the same thing.
All
the guys wanted to watch soap operas, and they were like 6 months old.
They were
I'm like,
6
how
months
good
old.
just can that be?
So when anyone got assigned that unit from the States, they cornered you right away. Okay, what's this soap opera up to now? What's this one up to now? Because they wanted to catch up because they were watching episodes way old. So anyone new arriving, the first thing you had to do was catch them up on their soap operas.
Interesting.
Isn't
Yeah,
it?
very, very
You never knew that about
interesting.
male Marines, did you? Yeah.
Okay, you have a day off. What did you do?
On my weekends off, I had a car, and somehow, which was such a blessing, I came in possession of a map of Okinawa back in the feudal ages. Was divided into precincts. They call them precincts, and each one had a big samurai in charge of that precinct, and they each had their little castle. So just fortunately, I came upon an ancient map that showed where each of those were located. So I'd run around out in the boonies, out in the jungle, with this map in my hand, watching for habus, because the island is full of habus, which is a poisonous snake, more poisonous than a rattlesnake, I will say. Fortunately, I never ran into any habus, but I was running around with this map, and I found quite a few just stone foundations of some of these, and that was just really fun. I just loved that. So with my little car, then I think I covered every square inch of that island from the north to the south.
Kathy, your day's off. What did you do?
Well, a couple of us would get together, and we'd, most of the time it was right after we were getting paid, and we'd go into town and go to the Kobe Steakhouse and have real beef and really good food for once. So that was kind of our goal, was to do that. And once in a while we get to go out to the beaches and check those out. Obviously I was stationed right on the water, but it wasn't really a beach. It was pretty, not a really great area to go sunbathe in or anything. So, but if you went further north, the beaches got nice in Okinawa.
Did you go on R&R, and did you happen to see a Bob Hope show?
I did see a Bob Hope show. I saw a Bob Hope show, and I saw the Globetrotters came and entertained us one time. Bob Hope was extremely old at that time, but it was, I felt honored that he took the time to come in and see us. So
Did you go on any R&R?
just that one trip up to in northern South Korea.
Okay.
That was the only R&R we got in those 5 months. So
Ramona, did you see a Bob Hope show?
No, I didn't.
R&R?
No, I took 2 big R&R trips, absolutely. One of them, I took a week of leave, and I flew over to Hong Kong and spent several days in Hong Kong, traveling around the island, seeing all the sights, eating all the great food, going out to the one district where they had all the jeans factories, and bought some brand name jeans for almost pennies. There's a big high mountain on top of Hong Kong. We took the tram up and ate dinner up at the top of the peak at night and got to see all the sights. Took one of those little Chinese boats, whatever they're called, junks, a Chinese junk, down the harbor and back on a trip, and got to see them got to see the Chinese on board playing Mei Wang, the Chinese game with tiles. And then I took a day trip up into Red China, which I'm not supposed to talk about, because when you're in the military, you have to get permission from Headquarters Marine Corps in Washington, D.C. to go into Red China. Well, I didn't do that, so you're not hearing this. But we took the train over across the border, and then we got on a bus. It was a group tour. We got on a bus and toured around, and then while we were eating lunch at this big dam that they had hand-built, I don't know how many hundreds of Chinese had hand built this humongous dam that the school children came out and sang to us. But we had to have a day visa to go in on this group tour. So she put down my name and then she said occupation. And I said military. And she said, no, we can't put military. She said, we put secretary. And if you get in there and they find out you're military, I'm not going to be able to get you back out. I said, okay, fair enough. I'll take my chances because I want to go in so bad and see Red China. So I spent a day in Red China, although you didn't hear that from me. And then another R&R I took was down to Taiwan. I flew down to Taiwan and spent several days touring the Taiwanese island, going to their large religious temples with Buddha, which is really amazing to see, and then seeing their museums, which on Taiwan they've got a Chinese museum of items going all the way back to the beginning of those dynasties, way back into the past. It was just amazing items to see and just kind of connect with and go, wow, I can't even imagine what 4,000 years ago it was even like when they were using these tools and drinking from those vessels. And so it was just really amazing to see Hong Kong and Taiwan.
Sounds like it was very interesting. You mentioned earlier, Kathi, that you went out to range and shot rifles and everything like
I
that.
qualified with the M16 and then with 45, and then because of being on guard duty in Korea, everything was considered close range, and so we qualified with a shotgun.
Okay.
And you just shot that from the hip. You didn't shoulder it at all. So
But you had to qualify often?
every year.
Every year.
Yeah.
Ramona, you had an interesting story about going to range.
Yes, I do. When I joined the service, it was required of all Marines, male and female, to go out to the range annually and to qualify with M16. And so we did that annually, except then when I graduated from Officer Supply School in Camp Lejeune, the general in charge of the base itself of Camp Lejeune, decided that he was not going to allow the women Marines to go out and qualify anymore because there were so many men to get out there and get qualified. He just felt that he just would cut the women out of qualifying with the rifle. So I went to the base commander, a general, and it took a lot of talking and a lot of arm twisting, but I convinced him to allow me to take a unit out to the rifle range of the enlisted women Marines in Headquarters Battalion. And there were about a couple dozen or so. So after a lot of talking and a lot of convincing, I got permission to do that. So I took the women out, and this was such big news at the time that the local TV station came out and actually recorded it, and afterward interviewed me. So then after that, when I got back to my unit, I wanted to sell my autographs because I felt that made me famous. Couldn't sell any. But anyway, while I was out there then with these women, then I was just so excited to be able to see them fire with the M16. It wasn't a full qualification. They just got to go out and do what's called a familiarization. So we did that for a day, and it was just really, it was a goal of mine that was just so wonderful to accomplish, because at that time women could not be in combat roles. Even though we were in a combat unit, they couldn't assign us to combat roles. So, but leaving us in the rear positions get overrun by enemy. So that was my big argument, and I said, hey, let's take the women out. So they did agree to let me take the women out. And then when it was my turn to fire the rifle, I had not even touched a rifle in over a year at this point in time, but I was allowed to shoot the rifle myself, and then I was able to convince them to keep my target, because that's also a big no-no. So you don't see this either. But I shot 6 rounds after not having touched a rifle in over a year. I shot 6 rounds, and this is my pattern right here. If I show you the back side, you can see it more clearly, that this is where my 6 shots went. I always did shoot expert when I went out and fired the M16A1 rifle. The officers also had to qualify yearly with the .45 pistol because you always, once or twice a month, were company commander for overnight. You had overnight duty to keep the whole company safe while everyone else was sleeping. So you had to carry a .45, and you had to go out and do tours, check all the motor pools, go around, drive around, make sure everything is secure. So we had to qualify with a .45 and carry it at those times. Then they went to a 9mm, and we all hated the 9mm. All we wanted to do with the 9mm was just go up and beat somebody to death with it. It had such poor shot, poor aim and poor shot in comparison to a .45.
Okay. You mentioned coming home on leave.
Mm-hmm.
How often were you able to make it back home on leave?
I always try to make it back at least once a year. I would normally take a week and zip back to Wisconsin, so that was it.
Enjoyed it?
Very much, yes. Yeah, it was always a nice homecoming, and my family was always very excited. My friends were excited to see me, and I'd spend a very fast week with them and then back to work. So.
Ramona, did you come home on leave?
No, I did not. I did my touristy thing and saw the world.
Okay, so now you got out. You spent how many years in the military?
I did 5 years active duty, and then after I got off active duty, I did 5 years reserve duty.
So 10 years.
Total of 10 years. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now you're done. Did you come back to Texas, or did you come back to Rapids, or where did you go?
Well, when I left the service, I was engaged to a Marine who was also leaving the service at the same time, and he was from Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh area. So when I got out of the service, I went and visited Mom and Dad first in Texas, and then I went up to Pittsburgh and got married.
Okay. That's quite an after service. After service, you're done. What did you do?
Well, I was down in Norfolk, Virginia when I got out of the service, and I had started working for a company about 6 months before I got off from active duty with the Marine Corps called Circuit City. And I started a 14-year career with them and went all over the United States with them after that. So
So a lot of traveling after you got out.
a lot of traveling after I got out. I spent a long time, my longest tour was in Norfolk. Most of the time that I was in the service was there with the G3 unit.
So you didn't come right back to Rapids as such. You spent time with Circuit City, you said?
Yeah, I was gone for the next 14 years with them.
Okay. When you came home, how were you treated?
From the second that I enlisted in the Marine Corps, everyone was extremely good to me. I mean, they always treated me well. In fact, when I enlisted in high school, I was 18 years old, and of course the drinking age was 18 at that time. So if I would go out, some of the older, saltier military men, they would always, make sure that they bought me a drink, which was always, much appreciated. So, but yes, everyone, was very respectful.
Ramona, how were you treated when you got out?
Well, I wasn't treated any different than anyone else because they didn't know I was a Marine, unless I told them. The men, you can look at them and they've got a military haircut, you can tell. So that's more obvious, but the women don't. So they couldn't tell.
Okay. Did you go on to school?
Yes, I did. After we got married, then we both went to graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh. And I got my master's in library science at that time. And I was also working across the street at the public library part-time in my little town. So we got our master's degrees and headed off to Illinois, where he received his first job after graduate school.
Okay, yours was in library science. What was your husband's degree in?
And it's called health physics. He's a specialist in radiation. He can detect it, he knows how to clean it up, he knows everything having to do with radiation.
Okay. Kathi, did you go on to school, take advantage of the GI Bill at all?
I did only for one semester before I ended up back on active duty down in Virginia in a bulk fuel unit, so.
So you-
I came back here and I went to the University of Stevens Point. That was, I think it was difficult for me to come back to college because I had been gone for so long and had matured much more than the kids that were there. In that time that I was gone in the Marine Corps, we had dealt with the Grenada rescue and the Beirut bombing, and my office was a very integral part of that. And to go to college and to have the young folks talk about how much they knew and how worldly they were was kind of frustrating at that time. So it was good for me to get back in the Marine Corps and back in the working world.
So you did 2 tours of the Marines?
No, I went back on active duty. I went on reserve duty to try school and failed at trying at school. I ended up back on active duty.
Okay, how did your career develop once you got out of the military to where you are today?
Well, with Circuit City, I joined them, and I just started in the stockroom with them. And one day, the president of the company came in and said, I was wrapping up VCRs or something like that, and he said, "What would you change if you could?" And I didn't really know who he was, so I told him, and the next thing I knew, I was running a department, and then I got promoted on from there. So, and when they found out I was a Marine, it was always a good mark on my resume. They knew I'd stay focused and I'd work hard and whatever mission they had, I would probably grasp it and go for it. So, best thing I could ever put on my resume.
So you would recommend military service to anybody?
I absolutely would. I think it's an excellent life experience, and the real world experience that you get from it, the socialization, the knowing people from other places in the world is invaluable.
Ramona, would you recommend military service to people?
Yes, absolutely. Getting to going overseas and just seeing the different cultures and just being immersed in them for a while, not just visiting for a few days and leaving, but being immersed in it and living it for 13 months on Okinawa. It was just amazing. I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Okay, are there any events from your service time that still bring a smile to your face?
Oh, taking that women detail out to the rifle range definitely does. Yes.
Kathi, anything from your service that you can recall that still brings a little smile to your face every so often?
Well, I think the friends that I made out there, it still brings a smile on my face because I still know them. We are still with each other. At that time we were all that we had over in Okinawa. We didn't know anyone else, and we became quick friends, and we didn't know it then, but it was friends forever.
And you're both members of the VFW post here in Wisconsin Rapids, both life members, I believe.
Yes.
And any other organizations that you guys belong to that are military related?
I am not, no.
Okay.
The Daughters of the American Revolution.
Right.
Yes, my patriots that fought for our freedom.
Do you ever do any reunions?
No, we don't. No.
Any formal reunions? Because you mentioned that you've met...
No formal reunions, but we have all seen each other since, so.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about today about your military service, Kathi?
No, just I think we've mentioned it. I like I said, I would truly recommend it for anyone, especially if they don't have a defined plan as to what they want to do with their life. That's a great start.
Ramona, anything else that you'd like to mention?
When you're commissioned an officer by the President of the United States, which I was commissioned by President Carter, he signed my commission that I have. It's a big fancy form that I have. Then you serve as an officer for life. I'm not sure too many people are aware of that, but you serve for life. So anytime something big happens and they need you, they can call you back. So after I ended my 5 years with the reserves, and it was just at home being mom to 2 young daughters, they called me up and almost sent me to the first Gulf War. They called me and they said, this is your first call, get your bags packed. When your second call comes, you will have 24 hours to be on your big bird, which when you get on an airplane and fly off, they call it the big bird. So I would have 24 hours to report and be on the big bird to go to the Middle East. But then the war ended before the second call came, so I was almost sent.
How long had you been out prior to that call?
Only about a year. Only about a year.
Okay.
But it's to be an officer in the military, it's a lifelong commitment, and you can drop everything and be called up at any second. So it's a big commitment. You have to take it very seriously.
Ladies, thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. And thank you for
Kathy.
watching.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.